Sexing the Body by Anne Fausta Sterling. And it talks a lot about how basically like our beliefs about gender bleed into a lot of our kind of scientific knowledge of sex, which is really interesting because usually people view sex as a biological thing that's either one or the other. It's very dualistic, when in fact that's very far from the case. You like my hair? Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, like, the sex binary is kind of something that I've been thinking about a lot lately because usually people go penis or vagina, and that your sex is completely separate from your gender, when in fact, a lot of the things we think about sex come from things that we think about gender, which is really interesting. Yeah. So I don't know, I'm just thinking, like, to what extent is sex a social construct, you know? And so far, I'm like, probably a lot. So, yeah, I don't know. In this book, like, the first example, I've kind of moved away from gender abolition to gender liberation. Yeah, me too. I've definitely strayed from gender abolition pretty far. It's not really, I feel like it's very, not revisionist, but like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it detracts from a lot of important things that need to be talked about. Simplistic. My voice is soothing. Thank you. Oops. I don't know what that was. Anyway. Yeah. But I guess what's frustrating to me is the way that people still, very progressive people, still kind of view sex as this static, completely binary scientific idea. And that gender is what's fluid and mental and emotional. But we perpetuate so many ideas about gender onto sex as well. And one of the examples that Fausta Sterling gives in this book is the idea that, like, you know how when we think about sex, we're like, oh, it's proven that boys are better at logical thinking and math, and girls are better at, like, English and social sciences and stuff, and that's kind of defined as, like, a scientific fact, when it's actually really just the symptoms of gender roles in society. The book is called Sexing the Body by Anne Fausta Sterling. Denonomy, you should have tacos for lunch. I'm a big fan of tacos. But yeah, I'm trying to come up with, like, a video idea talking about this, because there's so many people. Thank you for saying that I have good pronunciations in my guitar video. Should labels be abolished or so that we don't carry stigmas of gender and sexuality? It depends on what you mean by that. Do you mean, like, queerphobic stigma? Like the stigma of anti-LGBT sentiment? How do I debate TERFs without being called a misogynist? Just don't be a misogynist. People always say what they want to say, but as long as you're not a misogynist, then you aren't a misogynist. Where does... I am drained. I don't know what you're asking. I don't understand your question. Yeah, Comrade Junt. That's what I'm saying. I know that it's a social construct. That's the whole point. But yeah, I think the concept that the sex binary is a social construct. Oh, what does XX and XY chromosomes determine? it doesn't really determine much. It just means that you have XX or XY chromosomes. In my point of view, these like sex characteristics or secondary sexual characteristics are just individual characteristics that a body can have and don't determine a said sex per se, because human bodies are so complex that we can have a lot of different things going on that don't necessarily all align into one kind of thing. Like this book talks a lot about, oh hi Newport. This book talks about the kind of like sex testing they at least used to do in the Olympics, to determine whether athletes were males or females, and that it was really difficult to determine it many times, because it's so sex exists on so much of a spectrum, and it was particularly difficult to decide where intersex athletes should fall in like sports. Chromosome composition also varies from person to person regardless of their supposed gender. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, I could have any chromosomes. I don't know what my chromosomes are unless I get them tested. Like, I could have chromosomes that differ from my quote sex, which is quote female, even though I don't identify as a woman or with womanhood at all. So it's really interesting, I think. And I want to make a video about it. So that's why I went on live, because I'm trying to like formulate my thoughts and make a kind of coherent thing. But yeah, I think another thing that's really interesting is the way that doctors choose like a certain sex for children who are born intersex. Because there's really no like clear guidelines of how doctors are supposed to determine that, because deciding the sex of a child who doesn't neatly fall into one of the two categories, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, it's a social decision. It's a completely social decision to determine the sex of a child who is born intersex. How do I argue with someone who thinks trans men have an advantage in sports? Or like trans people? I'm pretty sure if you do some Googling, there are some statistics you can pull up that prove your point. I blame colonialism. Me too. I literally have no idea why our biological features are gendered. Exactly. And it's a lot. I think this book is partially why this book is so interesting is because the author, she's not only a feminist theorist and gender theorist, but she's also a biologist. So she can approach these kinds of thoughts from both sides, with the scientific side and like the gender theory side, which is really interesting so far. And I can't wait to finish this book and decide how I feel about it in the end. No, being bi is not transphobic. Can intersex people have kids? It depends. Because being intersex is not a third sex. It's just having both kinds of characteristics or anything. So it really depends on which characteristics an intersex person has. What book should I read after the GAM? I don't really recommend the GAM anymore. I think that gender abolition is kind of like a reductive point of view to take with gender. Some classics, there's The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, which is a classic. It's a little older, it's from the 50s, but I think it's a good read. This book, it's kind of difficult so far, but this one's cool. And I'm thinking, what other gender theory do I have? I can't think of any other ones right now. But yeah. It's really interesting, I think. And I think it's also a really difficult thing, like, understanding that sex is a social construct is a kind of difficult thing to accept. Oh, hi bestie, hi Jose. What are your thoughts on neopronouns? I think that... Oh my god, there's so much chat's going on. Okay, I think neopronouns are awesome. Neopronouns are epic. Neopronouns show the kind of, how do you say... They show the futility of gender. I think it's a very cool way to challenge cisness in a very, like, progressive kind of way. I love how anti-assimilationist it is. I love how radical it is. I love how they exist just kind of to exist, since most of the time neopronouns don't have any kind of connection to colonial standards of gender, and I think that's very awesome. Somebody said, so you're saying that me, a straight man, can compete in women's sports because there is no XX and XY? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that sexual characteristics occur on a spectrum. So it's really difficult to really clearly define someone's sex most of the time. I never said there isn't XX and XY chromosomes. There clearly are still chromosomes, but sometimes they don't coincide with the gender you are assigned. Why don't you recommend the GAM anymore? I read it and found it quite interesting. I also find it quite interesting. I think it ignores a lot of aspects of gender that are important. I think that it's very reductionist. Like, if we just get rid of gender, then all this will go away. But also, like, how are we supposed to do that, and why, and to what extent? And I think that the colonial concept of gender is really harmful and violent a lot of the time, but there are ways to subvert that are not gender abolition. Are you a reformist or a revolutionary? I wouldn't call myself like a revolutionary. I'm definitely not. I believe in revolution, if that's what you're asking. I don't believe in reform at all. But it's also something that I'm trying to navigate. In general, I don't like countries, and I don't like governments. But I also think that in the imperial core, we don't have any revolutionary potential in the imperial core. Do you think trans people should tell their partners they're trans? I think trans people should do what they want to do. I think it's completely up to them, and I'm not going to tell them what they should or should not do. I'm trans, and I do what I want, and everybody should just do what they want. And it's nobody's business to tell a trans person what they should or should not do, because that's ridiculous. In what order should I read theory? Great question. In whatever order you want. I think that if you think a book is interesting, try it out. And if it's difficult, then set it aside for later and read something else, and then maybe in the future, when you pick up that book again, you'll understand it better. I don't think that there are many rules. They're just books. They're not supposed to be in any kind of curriculum or order, and it's a free world, and it's super awesome that we can just do whatever we want. So yeah. Where do you get your info from? Like, news-wise. News-wise, Twitter. Do all non-binary people identify as trans? No. They can if they want to. I identify as trans, and I'm non-binary because I believe that transness and cisness are not at all compatible, because why would they be? And that it's cool to try to deconstruct cisness. And yeah. Why would you want to be cis? That's my question. Do you identify as feminists or a late feminist idea? I would probably say that I most closely align myself with Marxist feminism. I like a little Marxist feminism, intersectional feminism. Yeah. How the fuck do I get rid of this? Oop. Now that it says that, I don't have any questions. Hi Clementine. Remove question. My love, Clemmy. FTM or MTF? You can't ask people that. You're not allowed to ask people that. You're just not. You don't need to know. I don't need to tell anybody. And it's weird for you to ask that. And also, would you go and ask a cis person what their genitalia was or what their biology was? No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't. So, don't know why you need to ask me. So don't. And don't ever ask anybody that ever again. Yeah. Okay. Opinion on, oops, I love you, Clementine. I clicked on that by accident, but you're so sweet. If gender is more fluid than male, female, why do trans people go from one to another? There's a lot of reasons for this. You mean binary trans people? I think a lot of the time trans people don't feel exactly like a man or a woman binary. I feel like a lot of the time it is more fluid, but just for the sake of fitting into society, it is easier to explain it as one or the other. My pronouns are they, them. Thank you for asking. They're in my bio. I've been getting misgendered a lot lately, which kind of sucks. But yeah, my pronouns are they, them, and they're in my bio. And I did a pronoun check kind of recently that explains our relationship with other pronouns as well. But they, them is just my favorite. So Clementine's pronouns are yo-yo, yo-yo self. Thank you. Love it. Yeah. I'm trying to formulate my thoughts for this video that I'm going to make about sex. I feel like FTM gets more support than MTF, but everyone deserves support. There is a lot of trans misogyny that exists in this world, and it sucks, and it's disgusting, and there's definitely privilege that those of us who are not able to experience trans misogyny hold. And I think that's something that's really important for everybody to recognize and understand and internalize. Do you prefer neutral, masc, or femme terms? I like them all. Honestly, I feel like if you're gonna call me a girl or ma'am or something, then I'm like, don't do that. I don't like that one. But in general, I'm pretty chill. Just as long as you use the pronouns that I have in my bio and stuff. Yeah, it's not that difficult. Thanks for asking, though. Yeah. This video is gonna be... You like my tooth necklace? Thank you. It's from my friend Kat. Kat's Cult. She made it. It's really cool. How do you feel about Lady and Gentledom? I think it's stupid. I think Lady and Gentledom are kind of uncomfortable. And, not a fan. Some people like it. I'm not. I'm not one of them. Yeah. What time is it? 3:35. Okay, I have to teach kind of soon. So I'm going to try to make this video if I can think of what to say in it. Anyway. Thanks for watching my live.